a sudden, literally a wave of terror comes over me. And I turned around and his entire demeanor had changed. His eyes had gotten, literally, they looked like they were black.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide. Today, an angel, a murder attempt. Are we suddenly doing true crime? No, we're not. When you have this angel in this story, it's right up Touched by Heaven's alley. Welcome, episode 226. Glad you're here. I am your host, Trapper Jack. You know, lately I have been bumping into the Good Samaritan story. Just kind of over and over in different ways, Who is my neighbor? Who do I help? What about stranger danger and all of that? You know, we all want to be the Good Samaritan. We don't want to be the one going, I don't want to get involved. We don't want to think of ourselves as that way, do we? Well, maybe sometimes we do. This story is actually in a book that is co-authored by Katie, which led to another book. We'll talk about that with Katie in a moment here. But here's Katie, a young college-aged woman having no idea she's being targeted.
Are you there, Trapper?
I'm not in right now, but please leave a message wait, I am here. Never mind. Katie was baptized Catholic. All schooling was Catholic. Parochial school through high school, even college.
Went to Santa Clara University, good Jesuit university there. I would have to say that from about the age of, 15 or 16 on, I was not a particularly devoted Catholic or practicing Catholic. And my story actually has a lot to do with at least coming back to being a person of faith and spirituality, etc. I had an experience when I was 19 years old. I mean, do you want the whole?
Yeah, give me the stuff. The big story.
Yeah, so the big story actually, when I was summer after my freshman year at Santa Clara, I'm dating myself, but this is 1975. I worked in downtown San Francisco. I had set hours. I worked from 7 until 3 p.m. And my parents lived in Tiburon. And so I used to catch the 4:00 ferry because that was the earliest ferry in the afternoons. And so I always had time to kill. And I was window shopping on the corner of near Union Square. There was a famous store there by the name of I. Magnin, which, you know, all of us young women loved. And a stranger came up to me and, you know, he was maybe 30 years old, white button-down shirt, khaki pants, you know, clean cut, kind of guy you might take home to have dinner with your parents. And he said that he was a stranger in town, that he just had eye surgery and he needed to look up his best friend's parents who lived there in San Francisco. You know, could I help him? And so the first thing I thought was, don't take candy from a stranger. I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I went to the crosswalk. He followed me into the crosswalk. He repeated his story. He was so persistent. And then finally he said, I'm just staying up the street at the Hyatt. You know, there's a phone book in the lobby. Can you just help me out? And I thought, oh, okay, well, the lobby is going to be crowded with people. And why not be a good Samaritan? Because I have time. So we walked a block to the Hyatt, which is built on a hill. And we went into the hotel, as I recall, the floor below the lobby and got into and sure enough, there was lots of people around. We got into the elevator. The elevator was crowded. We were sort of in the back of the elevator. And it opens up on the lobby level and everybody gets out. But this man doesn't move. And in the split seconds it took for me to decide, what am I doing? The elevator doors shut. And I realized that he's pressed the mezzanine. And I am telling myself, okay, well, the mezzanine will be crowded with people. So the elevator door opens on the mezzanine and it's deserted. We get off the elevator and walk down a hallway. There's conference rooms. There doesn't seem to be anybody anywhere. And we make a left-hand turn into a long conference room. And sure enough, on the back wall, there's a payphone. And on the metal shelf below it is a phone book. And, you know, this is the olden days, but this is 1975. So I go and open the phone book, and I'm looking for a Brown family that lives on Marina Boulevard. I'm facing the back wall, and this man is standing sort of cat-a-corner behind me. And I start to look down the Browns. There's several columns, and all of a sudden, literally a wave of terror comes over me. And it's not like there was a checklist. It's like it was instantaneously, I realized there's no patch on his eye. Why would he not know the first names of his best friend's parents? Because in the olden days, that's how you would look somebody up with a common name like Brown. And why did he ask me? And I realized that I was in a lot of trouble. And I turned around, and his entire demeanor had changed. His eyes had gotten, literally, they looked like they were black. And it was like he knew that I knew, and that I was terrified. And that's what he was waiting for. And just as this moment passes between me and this man, there's a movement at the door, and a bellman walks in, and he looks me in the face and he says, "Don't you think you should be going now?" This is all like the Twilight Zone. And so I walk out of the room with the bellman. We go into an elevator the doors are open. We go down to the lobby. The bellman walks away. The man did not follow us. And a few seconds go by, and I get my little wits about me, and I think, oh my God, I should thank this guy, but he's nowhere to be seen. So I go home, and my dear Irish Catholic mother tells me that the bellman, was an angel. And I really didn't, at that point in my life, want anything to do with a spiritual explanation for what had happened to me.
So in this mezzanine level conference room, what was he going to do? Did you feel like you were about to be raped? Did you feel like you're about ready to be
killed? Raped?
I mean, literally, this guy could. He had the look of, "I'm just going to kill you."
Yeah, there was something really evil and terrible going on
that did not register with you earlier.
Correct.
It's like he turned it on, like he turned it on and off. I'm the charismatic guy in the street. I need some help.
Yes, that's right. And so 15 years go by, and I, other than having a nightmare on occasion with this man's face, I'd wake up and my heart would be pounding. I just compartmentalized the entire thing. I just didn't really want to deal with it. And I told very few people about it because I felt really stupid and embarrassed that I could be so naive that I would follow this guy. And then one night, my husband and I are in bed reading the morning paper, and he hands me the front page, and he said, "Oh my God, Katie, I think this is your guy." And there on the front page was a photograph of Ted Bundy, who had been put to death the day before in the state of Florida for he had
the sorority girls
committed. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And the article went on to recount how he was a frequent visitor to San Francisco and the Bay Area in the mid-1970s. He was the suspect in a couple of murders there. His victims were between the ages of 19 and 21. They were 5'6" or 5'7". Their hair was parted in the middle and long down to their waist, which is exactly how I looked back then. He feigned injury to lure his victims. And I knew that is who I encountered that day. And that was really the spiritual kick in the stomach, where I could no longer ignore what had happened to me.
And you have this bellhop savior. At that time, you kind of pushed back on the thought of spirituality.
I didn't want to believe that this was anything other than a coincidence, or for the longest time, because it's very uncomfortable to feel like you were singled out in this way.
Because of that bellman, that angel, whoever he was, suddenly shows up, says what he says. You can't ignore it, right?
Look, I've always been a believer in God, but I really didn't want anything to do with religion or, and now, and that was, like I said, 15 years later was you can call it a conversion experience if you want. It was like that. It really was sort of like a hit upside the head, get a grip. I just felt that God was more real and present in my life. And I felt so grateful. And I felt it, first of all, I felt it was very important that I give my children the same opportunity to believe and experience religion, Catholicism specifically, that I had. And it just became important to become much more of a formal believer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and a number of people have talked about how children do kind of awaken them to, well, wait a minute here. I don't want them just to grow up blindly and without some of the knowledge I had growing up. That just doesn't feel right. So often that's kind of a key thing. Was that, you think that was the main thing, or?
No, it really was the newspaper article about Ted Bundy that got me believing for the first time that I had, in fact, experienced some sort of a miracle. And you can't believe that and continue to walk away from God, religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it. And I up until then really had.
What did your husband do with that? How did that work for him? You said he's Catholic, Catholic.
He has been a stable Mass on Sunday, good Catholic guy his entire life.
Right.
Not a hiccup.
Really?
Really.
Take his temperature. What happened to him?
What happened to him? So that's the guy I'm married to.
Put some of that in the water, whatever that is, because most of us go fading away for a while, a long while in my case.
Right. And my case. And, he's married to this feisty, and I'm like, well, but no, he is steadfast in his faith. And, I have a lot of respect and admiration for that. I'm trying to become a good Episcopalian at this point.
Well, it's kind of Catholic light.
It's Catholic light. My husband is a good Catholic.
Now, when he looked at the picture, because he saw it first and then showed you, what made him think that was your guy?
He read the article, about how he was a chameleon, how he was charming, and then he was evil, and how he had, feigned injury, and how he was literally placed in San Francisco at that time,
Mm-hmm.
And so, and also the description of all of his victims. You take my senior year high school photo and put it up next to all the women that he murdered, and we all look like, twins. It's just really freaking eerie.
So what do you think? Was it an angel, an actual angel, or just a bellman being inspired to come in and say peculiar words? What's your theory?
My theory, Trapper, is that God works in mysterious ways. So I am open to any possibility and suggestion. I think it's possible he was a real person and he walked in and saw something that didn't, look, if a bellman had simply walked in and said, oh, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, that's what you would expect. But what had always, the clincher for me was that he looked at me and said, don't you think you should be going now?
That's the kicker. Yeah.
Which is a really odd thing to say.
It's really odd.
So it's a really strange thing to say. And, again, otherwise, I would have just run out of the room and run down the stairs or found my way out or whatever. It was what he said to me and the timing, of course, of his appearance. But that could easily be...
There's no way you get out of that room.
No, there's no way I get out of that room.
If he wants you, there's no way. He's got you. There's no one else there. He can do whatever.
Yeah.
Did you have any awareness to Ted Bundy's reaction?
None.
You were just riveted. Boom. That's my opening. Goodbye. Yeah.
Literally, I turned around to this evilness that had all of a sudden permeated the room and continued my eyes. Literally, my eyes continued to the doorway and never left the eyes of that bellman. I never looked back.
Well, glad that you're still with us.
I'm
And
glad I
have
am
you
too.
changed your part?
Yeah, I now part my hair on the side and it's shoulder length.
There, see, that's much safer.
Much safer.
Much safer. There was somebody else, I read another book about somebody who worked alongside him, and just the nicest guy in the world. Charismatic, nice. This on-off, a demon inside that whatever was in him. Interesting, and as you grew up Catholic, so maybe you know this story, maybe you don't. But those sorority girls down in Florida, when he was going on it, was he knifing them? As I remember it, was he knifing them?
You know what? I find it very hard to read anything about him, but yes. And the one thing I did hear about him is that another of the women that somehow escaped him said the same thing that I had always said all these years, that his eyes had turned black.
Yeah. He was about to walk into another girl's room to kill her, and he stopped, and he said he told a Monsignor later this story in jail, and he said there was something there. There was just this force. I couldn't walk in there. I think he dropped his weapon and ran at that point, but they caught him or something.
Oh, wow. I did not know this story.
The girl was holding a rosary.
Oh my goodness!
And her mom had told her and the girl had agreed that when she would go to college, she promised to pray a rosary every night. And we're big on the rosary around Touched by Heaven. I've just seen too many miracle stories. Or you talk about your miracle stories surrounding the rosary and things like that. Just power that comes off of that, and protection from evil that comes off of that. So that kind of goes along with the story as well.
Yeah, definitely. And my co-author, Joan, her story involves Bernadette and Lourdes.
Really? How?
Well,
let's pause right about here. Then more with Katie here on Touched by Heaven. And the story of, we have St. Bernadette, we have Lourdes, and we have an 80-year-old movie that all leads us to another miracle coming up in a moment. First, quick Patreon shout out. Thanks, Sue. Sue Wilkinson has just come aboard and has become a Patreon supporter. Thanks for that, Sue. Appreciate it. If you too find these stories to be a blessing and help you with your faith and draw you closer to God, well, you can do what Sue did, which is to come to patreon.com and search for Trapper Jack. Or you can come here to episode 226 and just click your way through. And thank you so much for your support. We do appreciate it. All right, let's get back to Katie and more of Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God.
And my co-author, Joan, when she was young, her favorite movie was The Song of Bernadette.
Yeah. Jennifer, what's her name? Jennifer
Jones?
Jennifer Jones. There you go. Yeah.
I think in 1943.
Big budget, multi-starred movie.
Yes. And Joan, who is a practicing Catholic, and Bernadette is her gal. Let's just put it that way. As is, Lourdes, and I'm a big believer in Lourdes. And one of the stories we tell in our first book is Fatima, which of course has a lot to do with the rosary. But anyway, so Joan's son, to make a slightly longer story short, her miracle story is really a series of coincidences. Why was she where she was when she saw David was in all this terrible pain? And so she took him to the doctor when she probably normally wouldn't have. It turned out that he had a congenital anomaly that had never before been seen on a live person. Both of his coronary arteries originated on the same side, which meant that when he exercised, and he was a big athlete, he was in 8th grade at the time, it pinched the aorta or whatever. And when you have this, you just drop dead. That's what happens. In the case of David, he suffered severe chest pain. And because Joan had actually been there to witness it, she took him to the doctor. They ultimately find out what this problem is. And the renowned physician who they tracked down to try and do this surgery, which, by the way, nobody had ever survived. And he said, look, I don't have the room to move the misplaced coronary artery to the correct side. All I can really do is do a bypass, which we're going to have to redo every 10 years. And this athletic kid's going to be relegated to the couch for the rest of his life. So they're in the hospital waiting room for this open heart surgery that her 13-year-old son is having, and by the way, they sprinkled him with the water from Lourdes prior to his surgery. And a couple of hours into the surgery, there's a phone call for Joan up at the nurse's station that she's called up, and they have gone to one far end of the waiting room because they've got this television is blaring with Jerry Springer and Talk Show Central, and they just didn't want to be anywhere near it. And sure enough, she goes up to the nurse's station, and Jerry Springer's still talking, and she picks up the phone, and they tell her that they are about to enter the most dangerous part of the surgery, and that things are going well. And so she hangs up the phone, and just as she does, she hears somebody call Louise. And Louise is her maiden name. In fact, if you look at our books, it's Joan Louise Hill. And she thinks, well, who is calling Louise? And she turns around, she looks at the television, and guess what's all of a sudden playing on the television? The Song of Bernadette.
From Jerry Springer to Song of Bernadette.
The Song of Bernadette.
Does somebody have a remote in the room that they're flipping channels?
The parents are all looking at each other going, how did the channel, what is going on?
They didn't do it.
And they did not do it. And according to Joan, well, not according to Joan, she finds out Louise is the name of Bernadette's mother, spelled differently. But when she heard Louise being called, it was someone calling Bernadette's mother in the movie.
Oh my gosh.
Which is why she turns around.
Yeah.
And, the parents are all looking at her for some reason, and she explains to them the story of Bernadette. And, most of the parents have left by the time the final credits roll. And the doctor comes out and he said, I have miraculous, unbelievable news. He said, when we got in there, the width that I needed, the width of a nickel, was there exactly. And we were able to do the permanent fix. And David went on to captain his Division I swimming team, and he's now an emergency physician.
This is such up touched by heaven alley here. I love it when God speaks.
We love it when God speaks too.
Okay, and your book titles give your book titles now.
Sure. So the first book, which was published roughly 10 years ago, is called The Miracle Chase. 3 women, 3 miracles, and a 10-year journey of discovery and friendship. And the second book, which was just published last year, is called The Miracle Collectors, Uncovering Stories of Wonder, Joy, and Mystery. And that book came about. I think this is also touched by heaven's alley completely, is that as we traveled around the country talking about the first book, an unexpected consequence of that is that, and maybe you find this in your podcast, maybe you don't, because people are willing to tell you their stories, but by and large, what we have found is that it's not easy to tell these stories for a variety of reasons. And so we always felt a little vulnerable in telling our stories, but we felt like this is what we were called to do, and this is what we were going to do. And but what the unexpected thing was, people came out of the woodwork to tell us their stories. And we realized that somehow we had given people permission to tell miracle stories. Over time, we just started to write them down, hence the collecting. And we realized that we had been gifted as story keepers and thought we should give it another go. Yeah. And so we wrote the second book.
You're probably like me in that it all feels like a gift, in that in the almost 4.5 years we've been doing this, 225 plus episodes, is that there's always been a story every week, sometimes multiple stories every week. There's just this constant river, flowing river of stories. Of just and a lot of them, as you may have heard, I never told nobody knows this story. I've been hanging on to it and they feel safe here as they feel safe with you.
I got a story from someone on an airplane. It's not like she knew who I was or what I did for a living. Not that being a miracle collector or a miracle chaser is what you dream about as a kid, but that is what I do now. And she just said, I have to tell you this story.
Why? Because
And
you
it really
started saying what you do, and then they went, well, I got one?
no, no. I was reading a book. She said, is there a dog in your book? And I said, there is. So she must have heard of the book or something like that. And she said, well, I have a miracle story about a dog. And I said, really? And so she proceeded to tell me how this dog saved her life. She just, gotten a divorce, and it's kind of a long story, but it's really a story about gratitude and recognizing that a higher power was involved in all these small things that happened. And I don't know about you, but what we have found is that miracles are really on a continuum. You have, at least our definition of miracle, I suppose, is maybe because we're both Jesuit educated Catholics, this idea that of finding God in all things. Einstein said there's only two ways to live your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know that quote. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is a miracle. And so I think that he understood the mystery of nature and the universe as being something so extraordinary that it was beyond, really beyond our comprehension.
How many stories are in your second book?
50.
Wow. Look at you.
There's a lot.
And are they telling them? Is the person telling it? Is that how you wrote
No,
it? Or
no,
are you telling the story?
We are telling their stories. We got every single person's permission to do so. We also culled stories from the media, from television. I mean, for example, we tell the story about the 33 miners.
Oh, that's a great story. My gosh.
Yeah, and there's a lot of miraculous things that happen in that story. The same thing with the 13 Thai soccer players.
Incredible miracle story. Have you seen the 13 Lives movie yet?
Yes,
Beautiful.
I just saw it.
Beautifully told.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
It is just beautiful. And you look at the coincidences and the things that had to take place, the generosity of spirit.
There's no way they get out alive.
There's no way without God's
They're in there
grace.
like 2.5 miles.
Yes.
And being knocked out with anesthesia for how many hours? 5.5 hours? Whatever the heck it was to get him out of there. Crazy.
Yep.
Without God, without all the world's prayers.
Right. All the world's prayers in every, religion and faith tradition that was available. I believe everybody was praying. And so we got some of our story, we used some of those stories. There are some, those are well-known stories. There are some very little-known stories, like, the young boy who was able to literally somehow jack up a car that had fallen on his father. And later when he was asked, he wasn't able to do it. And he said, well, the angels helped me. So that was a story that was in the media. Kierkegaard talks about miracles as signs. I think at the very least, a miracle is a sign.
Yes, that's what the Apostle John called him too. Yeah, he called them signs. Yeah.
Yes, signs and wonders. And this one mom came up to us and said, I have a story I have to relay to you. We were in LA, and she's in LA, and she was an executive in a pretty male-dominated field. She had 3 children under the age of 5, and she said it wasn't sustainable. And no one at my company had ever worked part-time. And so I knew it wasn't possible. And she said, this one day, I'm driving down the freeway in LA, and I literally, my 3 kids are in the back seat. I've got too many errands to do in too little time. And she said, they're squawking in the back, making lots of noise. And I threw up a prayer. I just said, God, just tell me what to do. And she said, literally right then, there is a huge billboard on the freeway. And the icon for this, it was a beer, a brewery. And the icon was Our Lady of Guadalupe. Their mascot was Our Lady of Guadalupe. And underneath in huge letters, it said, just ask. So she goes in on Monday morning and tells her boss, it's not sustainable. I have to work part-time, or I can't continue working. And he said, fine.
Just ask.
Just ask.
Yeah. I love it.
So I think that's a good one about miracles is just ask.
Just ask. That's right. Well, this has been lovely, Katie. I appreciate your time.
Trapper, thank you. Thank you for having me. And Joan and I both will continue to listen to your podcast and wish you all the best.
Thanks, Katie. Katie Mahon. The book again is called The Miracle Collectors, co-authored by Joan Hill, and the original The Miracle Chase with Ted Bundy and an angel. Creepy, wasn't it? That was just creepy. And by the way, in the second story, the St. Bernadette, Lourdes, the Song of Bernadette, that movie, in case you haven't seen it, my favorite part about the movie, and this is 1943, this was put together, but I have suggested to God that he incorporate something the movie brings to light, which is it's so important when you have a miracle, and there are a lot of like miraculous things going on. They provide that angelic choir that should sing at all miracles. You know, that that tells you while you're watching a movie that a miracle is happening, as opposed to out here where you get no music. Sometimes you need a little music to go, hey, stupid, that's a miracle going on. All that kind of stuff. So that, 1943, The Song of Bernadette. It was a big budget movie at the time. Cool stuff. All right, what is your cool story? What is your Touched by Heaven story? Get a hold of me here at touchedbyheaven.net. Ratings and reviews, those always are helpful, so thank you for keeping us a 5-star podcast. I will tell you that there's a Patreon link here. Thanks for your support. And I will tell you that we'll come back next week here at Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack, sometimes described as, well, I don't know, Katie, how would you describe me?
Maybe 30 years old, white button-down shirt, khaki pants, clean cut, kind of guy you might take home to have dinner with your parents.